going on, guys? Ottawa Scotty here. I got kind of a different video here for you today. We're going to take a break from fixing motorhomes. This video is actually an interview that I did about 3 weeks ago with my dad, Arnold Reeves, who is an electrical engineer, and he worked for CBC Radio Canada for I think over 40 years, his entire career really. I don't know much about my dad or what he did. I've always been fairly curious about his career, so I thought I'd toss up a camera and interview him. So it was really an impromptu interview. I had no idea what I was going to ask him. No questions were prepared. My dad had no idea he was going to be interviewed, so I really just told him to sit down on a chair. Yeah, I'm going to ask you some questions, and he was really weirded out. So I apologize for that, Dad. But really happy we did this. I had a really good time doing this, and there's some really interesting things in this interview. So that's why I'm putting this on my channel. It deals with the birth of the era of satellite communications in Canada and connecting the country through satellite, very remote regions, and there's actually some very interesting little nuggets in there about hockey night in Canada. Yeah, I really hope you enjoy this interview. I had a lot of fun doing this, and without further ado, this is my dad, Arnold Reeves. Okay, so Dad, what year were you born?
1945.
And where were you born?
I was born in Summerside, Prince Edward Island.
And what was your family's primary occupation at the time?
My father had a trucking business and a farm machinery business.
And was that something that you participated in? Was that?
Yeah, when I got to high school age, I actually, for a period of time, left school and started working in the business, driving trucks and putting farm machinery together and so on.
Okay, and at what age did you do this until? Like what?
I did that until I was around 20 years old.
And and then what happened after that? Did you decide to go to university or?
Initially, I thought I might join the Air Force and become a pilot, but in the fall, my graduating year, a lot of the universities were coming around to the high schools, and they were sort of recruiting students. So I decided at that point that I would try my engineering. So I applied for first year engineering at Mount Allison University, which is in New Brunswick.
Okay, so you originally wanted to be a pilot.
I thought that I would go that route, yes.
Interesting. And what as you were growing up as a kid, what made you think that you wanted to be a pilot?
I just thought it would be interesting. I liked, airplanes and driving machinery and that sort of thing, so I thought I would just try it out. We had an Air Force base, quite a large Air Force base in Summerside at the time. So anyway, I thought, well, it might be a nice thing to pursue.
And you obviously were working on the farm equipment at the time too, so you had a general, would you say you had a general curiosity or interest in machinery and that type of thing?
Well, my uncle, my father and my uncle were in business together. And my uncle was a mechanic and got his mechanic license through the Army during the Second World War, sorry. And so he ran a garage across the road, so my cousin and I were always around the garage putting small engines together, tearing them apart, and building crystal radios and that kind of thing. So I got all kinds of interesting. I got a lot of familiarity with mechanical things and electrical things and so on.
So that was from your uncle that that sparked that kind of interest.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, so sorry, you said you were the Mount Allison. You said
That was the first university I went to.
okay,
Yes.
in New Brunswick, and you said they had some kind of a recruiting thing that came to town.
Well, there were several universities actually came to town, and
To your high school, or
to the high school. Yes,
Okay.
they recruited in the high school,
and sorry to interrupt. Your grades were always good in school. You were always you did well, and
yeah. And
would you say you were particularly gifted in school, or was it like just
No, math and sciences came quite easy to me. I never worked particularly hard to get good grades.
okay?
Languages was a little different.
Right, right.
Anyway,
So you were so you were kind of already predisposed to that. Or I don't want to say predisposed, but I guess you know what I'm trying to say. You had a general interest, and that was the thing that came easiest to you. That sort of.
yeah, I and I liked working around the garage and so on. And I don't know how old I was, but at one point in time, would have been probably around 20. Anyway, just before I left the business, I ended up rebuilding an engine in one of my father's big trucks. And
Interesting. So you then how old so you decided to go to Mount Allison for university in New Brunswick, and how old were you when you went to university?
I was 21.
Okay, and you did your undergraduate in
Electrical engineering.
and how long did that take you to?
I spent 3 years at Mount Allison University.
Was it a 4-year program or a 3-year?
It was a 5-year program.
5-year program, and you
Yeah.
did it in 3 years. How
Well,
did that
no,
work?
It was a 3-year. It was 3 years at Mount Allison, and you got a certificate of engineering, and then I had to go to the University of New Brunswick to finish my last 2 years.
Why was that?
Well, Mount Allison only offered 3 years of the 5-year engineering
Oh,
program.
okay, I see. So in total, it was a 5-year program. The last 2 years, why? Is there any particular reason why the last 2 years would have been spent at another university? Were there better facilities there, or?
Well, I could only take the first 3 years at Mount Allison, and the reason I went there was dollars and cents. It was cheaper for me at the time to go to take my first 3 years there and then transfer to, and in the Maritimes we had 2 options. We had Nova Scotia Tech or University of New Brunswick that provided that last 2 years.
Okay. So, and you completed all your studies in that 5-year.
Yeah, yes.
Okay, and was it particularly challenging? Did you do well, or you had to work very hard? I would assume.
Yeah, it's like most people. You have subjects that you're very good in, and subjects that are more of a struggle. So the subjects that I was good in, I breezed through those, and it allowed me to spend then more time on the subjects that I wasn't so good in.
Okay, so you graduate from university, and then what happens after that? You're what, about 25?
Yeah.
You're 26, about like that. So
yeah.
you graduate from University of New Brunswick, and then you're, as far as I understand, you're not a professional engineer yet, correct?
No, you have to work in the engineering field for I believe it was a year at the time.
A year, okay.
Before you could actually then get your professional engineering designation.
So what happens after that? So you graduate university, and where does life take you after that?
I had worked for 2 summers for the CBC at the shortwave plant in Sackville, New Brunswick. And I was offered a job before I even graduated to go to the CBC and work in New Brunswick. The interesting thing was that was as a technician, and I worked as a technician. They were putting in new transmitters at the time, and they were all computerized and so on. So I got to spend a fair bit of time working on that project. Plus I went to Dallas, Texas for a month and learned their computer programming and so on and so forth. And after the year in New Brunswick, I was offered a job at engineering headquarters in Montreal.
How did you, this was while you were doing, this was a summer job you did while you were in school?
Yes.
Okay, and then so you graduate, and because you had been working in your summers for the CBC as a technician,
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
Then they offered you a full job immediately after you graduated,
That's
correct?
right.
And sorry, you said you went to Dallas to learn, what exactly were you doing there? And who, did the CBC send you to Dallas?
Yes.
How long were you there for?
I was there for about 6 weeks.
Okay, and what company were you?
It was Collins Radio, because that's who we bought the equipment from. And these were 250,000 watt transmitters. Then they were all computerized. And so I got to learn computer programming, the computer electronics. I got to learn the ins and outs of the mechanical transmitter itself. So then when I went back to Sackville to my job, then I actually worked along with the engineers on the project that we're doing the installation.
Okay, as a technician.
As a technician.
And when you say installation, what exactly are you talking about? Like you're physically installing the transmitters and like wiring them up and hooking them up, testing them? And
I worked mostly with the guy that was putting in the computer system. And I worked with him, of course, with any computer system, when you put it into actual operation, it doesn't necessarily always work the way it was planned originally.
right.
So I did some computer programming and to change, what we used to refer is you would put in patches
Right.
to take out bits of the bad program and then put in
Right.
alternative, the new software.
Interesting. And where were these transmitters?
They were in a big building which is located on the marshes of Sackville, New Brunswick.
Okay.
And I guess people who drive on the Trans-Canada Highway would know it because of all the big antenna arrays that were all out in the field around the building.
So the best of your knowledge, does that transmitter site still exist?
No, they've closed it down. I believe that the transmitter arrays are all there. The building is still there, but I think most everything else is gone.
Okay. I guess the reason for that be everything's digital now, or
Well,
satellite?
Satellites came along, and there's still people who use ham radio and stuff for, and there is still probably shortwave radio probably exists in some parts of the world because it transmits a long distance, and they may be using it in third world countries to communicate to the general population.
Okay. So you worked for approximately 2 years doing this, and then what happens after that?
I worked for a little bit longer than 1 year, and I was at the time doing some design work for the antennas, and the engineer who was involved, who was the supervising engineer, he was located in Montreal. And I guess he went back to his boss in Montreal and said, I've got this graduate in Sackville helping me out with antenna redesign. Anyway, I was on summer holidays on PEI, and I got a call from Montreal offering me a job in Montreal.
Okay, so you then moved to Montreal?
Yes, yeah.
And what year was that, like, approximately?
I would been probably around 1972.
Okay, so you moved to Montreal, and then what's your job in Montreal? What did you do?
I was a project engineer.
So you continued designing antennas?
Well, my first job in Montreal was, they had just put up the Anik 1 satellite for, and the CBC bought channels on it to broadcast to northern Canada and to use for networking back and forth across the country. So I worked initially along with the engineer who was the project engineer. I was sort of junior, but anyway, I worked with him in installing, helping go across the north and installing live television and radio into northern communities.
So the Anik, sorry, you said Anik E?
Anik 1.
Anik 1.
Anik A1.
And what, was that one of the first satellites that CBC?
That was the first satellite that went ever into the air that was used for broadcasting and telephone and that sort of thing.
Interesting. And who owned that satellite?
Telesat Canada.
So CBC worked closely with Telesat?
Yeah, Telesat Canada was a Crown corporation, as was the CBC.
Ah, I see. Who put the who put the Anik E satellite up? What company launched it? Do you know?
I don't remember. Well, it would have been NASA, I guess,
Okay.
back in those days, because they were the only game in town that were putting satellites.
And you said that was one of the first communications satellites that Canada had, correct?
It was one of the first communication satellites in the world.
In 1972, yes, because when did the first satellite, that's very interesting. So at that time there would probably be only a handful of satellites in orbit.
Yeah, I think there were, weather satellites and stuff. I don't, that was a long, long time ago.
Yeah, no, for sure. But that's very interesting. And so your job with the Anik 1 satellite was to, what were you trying to do?
I worked directly, I was the direct contact with Telesat Canada to interface our part of the project, which was they were putting up the dishes, which at that time were 28, 32-foot dishes, and they had a small building, and they would put all the satellite electronics in that building, and we then ran television feeds, audio feeds, and so on over to our transmitter building. And so, quite often we all worked together. I mean, if they were working on a particular site in the north, we were there as well doing our part of it, so that when we all left, virtually that went live to air. I don't remember exactly whether they had an official on-air opening date for the system. I don't remember that.
What parts of the country were you working in?
I worked from the Eastern Arctic all the way to the Western Arctic.
Eastern Arctic, so...
And some communities as well in the northern provinces, like British Columbia,
So
Alberta.
on today's map of Canada, that would be what, Nunavut? Or Northwest Territories, or because it's not Northwest Territories anymore, but
Yeah,
like,
it is. There's the Yukon.
so you're way up in the
I
Yukon.
was in the Yukon. I was in the Northwest Territories. The Eastern Arctic was just the Eastern Arctic in those days, and none of it.
Yeah.
That was. Um,
Yeah, because
all the communities got changed, and their names got changed.
right.
For instance, in the Eastern Arctic, we used to go to Frobisher Bay. Now it's called Nunavut.
Okay. So you were responsible for bringing all those communities Hockey Night in Canada, correct? I mean, that was part, like, the work that you did.
Yeah, what they had before that was they had television, which was taped in, I believe it was Calgary or Edmonton, and was shipped into the north, and the communities would play the tapes back. But that was the issue. All live hockey games and things like that weren't live. They were probably 3, 4, 5 days old before the people in the north
I'm
got
sorry.
to see them.
You said they recorded them and shipped the tapes?
Tapes, yes.
And then they had some kind of a broadcasting tower there that they would broadcast that from, I would assuming.
That's right.
Analog. And it was just like you would pick it up with rabbit ears on your TV?
Well, yeah, yes. Somehow outdoor antennas as well.
Interesting. That is very, very interesting. And so you do this work. How long did you participate in this? Was there an ending to that work that you were doing at some point?
Yes, I spent 2 years in Montreal doing that kind of work. I also did other work in my second year, like put FM stations in Newfoundland, like transmitter stations, I mean. And then I was offered a job in Halifax, Nova Scotia as the assistant regional engineer. And that was responsible for engineering in the 3 maritime provinces.
Can you be more specific? Like specifically, what were you responsible for there? Overseeing projects, or
The engineering offices in the CBC at that time were responsible for all the properties, all the buildings, all the transmission system in the 3 provinces. We had staff the technical staff, and we had building technical staff as well. And so, I was sort of the assistant to the regional engineer who ran that whole department.
you're coordinating things for all of that?
Yeah, I mean, at that time I was doing more administration work. Once I moved out of Montreal, I was in an office doing budgets and hiring and all of that kind of thing.
I see. Because you were knowledgeable with respect to the skills required to keep all that infrastructure up and running. So now you were in an administrative position where you were sort of like human resources or
No, it was engineering.
Yeah.
But I ended up hiring technicians
Okay.
and supervisors and so on for both the building area and, I mean, the staff at that time in Halifax, well, the engineering staff, the engineering office would have consisted of maybe 10 people. And then we had technicians who were located in different cities in the Maritimes. Like we had an operation in Charlottetown, Fredericton, New Brunswick, Moncton, New Brunswick, St. John, New Brunswick, and then throughout Nova Scotia as well.
So you work in Halifax in this position till approximately when, and then what happens after that?
I worked there for 2 years, and then I was offered a job in Montreal, or not Montreal, sorry. I was offered a job in Ottawa as the engineer looking after the same responsibilities for Northern, CBC Northern and Armed Forces Services.
Interesting. So you work in Ottawa for a little bit, and it's sort of a similar position as you had in Halifax.
Yeah, same.
A little bit higher up, maybe.
Well, I was the boss then. In Halifax, I was sort of number two.
And then you get promoted to like the boss in Ottawa. And my understanding, that building is still there. It's on Heron Road. Is that the one you were working on? The one that's shaped like a...
No, my office at that time was on Lanark.
In
Lanark Avenue.
Lanark, okay.
And
what part of Ottawa?
It's near Westboro.
Okay, interesting. So you work in Ottawa for a little bit, and then, how long were you in that position for?
I was in that position for 8 years, I believe.
Okay, and then what happens after that?
I was offered that same kind of position in the province of British Columbia.
Okay, so that would have been around
I think we moved to Vancouver in 1982.
1982, correct. Okay, so you go to Vancouver, and you had a similar position there. And how long were you there for in Vancouver? Well, I guess I would know, right? Because
1992. So
yeah, 1992 is when we moved back to Ottawa.
That's correct.
Correct. And why did you come back to Ottawa?
I was offered a job as director of engineering for regional broadcasting for the CBC, and that's when I worked out of the building on Bronson.
On Bronson.
On Bronson.
Okay,
yeah.
And that's sort of like the big headquarters, I guess, for the CBC. Is there any other building in the country that's higher up than that building there?
That would have been the office of all the presidents, and well, I shouldn't say that. It was the president of the CBC, vice president, and all the head of accounting, all the staff departments like human resources, accounting, and IT, and all of that would have been located in that. They would have been in that building.
And at that point, what is your title at that point?
I was director of engineering for regional broadcasting.
So just to be clear,
and I reported to the vice president of regional broadcasting.
Yeah, so can you help kind of people understand what, like on the hierarchy of positions for the CBC, like how high up is that, and what exactly, what are you controlling at this point? Like what are you doing at this point?
I'm looking at, again, it's all administration. It's budgeting, forecasting, dealing with staffing issues across the country. When I was there would have been probably like the entire transmitter and building staff across the country for the CBC would have come under me.
Okay. So and you're keeping track of the budgeting for all of that, and
there's all kinds of other issues that are always come up that are administrative in nature. I would spend time doing presentations to like once or twice I did presentations to the board of directors on certain issues, the board of directors for the CBC and the presidents and vice presidents. So
okay. So that's, and then you had a few other little positions after that, correct?
That's correct.
So what happens after that? Around so you work there for?
Well, I worked there for, I guess it was about a year, probably a year and a half. And all of a sudden, they started reorganizing things in the CBC, and they closed what was called regional broadcasting, and so we were out of a job.
Okay, okay. So what happens after that?
I stayed working because I had some things in the mill, and I just didn't want to let it drop. And I guess we were given until the middle of June, end of June or something of that year to find other employment. And
Outside of the CBC, or?
that's correct.
Oh, really? So they actually terminated your position, and they were going to like let you go from the CBC.
That's right.
Interesting. With any kind of did you have a pension at that point? Or
Oh yeah.
Okay, so that's kind of nerve-wracking, I guess.
Well, yeah, it was at the time. You'd have your good days and your bad days.
Okay.
But in the end, the vice president of English television, or the vice president of English television in Toronto, was a friend of mine and the guy that I had worked with in Halifax when I was back in the days of in Halifax, Nova Scotia. And he walked into my office one day and offered me a job in Toronto with English television.
Okay, and that was still with the CBC?
That's right.
Okay, so you went to Toronto.
So, and that was offered before the deadline came up. So I just transferred to a job in Toronto.
And what was your responsibilities there?
I was director of engineering there for regions, the regional, but that also included, the capital. Well, my main role was looking at capital planning for all the facilities in the region, which included the studios and everything. So, we would put in a budget. I would go to head office and argue for, various projects across the country and so on. And I did that for about a year. And then I was offered a job by the vice president of engineering to take over all the engineering operations in Montreal. And so I moved to Montreal then.
Okay, so you're kind of jumping around quite a bit at this point in your career. So now you're in Montreal. What are you now doing in Montreal?
I was running the transmission engineering department with, I don't know, maybe 50 engineers, design engineers.
Okay,
And all the operations, the engineering operations across the country in all the regions.
you're still working for the CBC at
Yeah.
this point? Okay, so you spend how long in Montreal?
I spent 2 years doing that.
Okay, and then what happens after that?
And then I got I was 6 months away from full retirement, and I had already spent 3 years commuting back and forth to Toronto and Montreal, so I decided to leave the CBC.
Okay, but you were 6 months away from,
I was really close to having my full pension, and of course they were laying people off, so the deals were pretty sweet back then.
Yeah.
And I knew that was coming to an end. Being in administration and budgeting and all of that, I knew that those packages were going to come to an end soon, so I decided to take a package and go.
Okay, so you retired after that 2 years in Montreal.
That's right.
And your entire career, and then you did some small little freelance work after that.
I started my own engineering consulting company and I did projects for, I guess, another 3 years, and most of those projects were with CBC.
Okay.
Doing work for CBC.
And what was that company called?
Reeves Broadcasting.
Re-
Broadcast Engineering.
Reeves Broadcast Engineering, correct?
I think so.
Yeah. So your entire career, engineering career, was how long? So from the age of 26 until when did you take your retirement package?
I took my retirement package in 97,
97, okay.
but I worked, like I said, for 3 years after that, so it would have been around 2000 that I actually quit.
And was it would you say just to kind of wrap the whole thing up, your whole work life, did you enjoy working as a professional engineer, and was it a fulfilling job, and did you generally are you happy with what you did?
Yeah, sure. I got to travel from the very north all across the country in the south. I mean, I've been into communities that a lot of people have never seen or won't see in their lifetime.
Right, right.
And it was interesting in the fact that I was willing to, if a job came up and it was better than what I had, I was willing to pick up and move wherever I had to go to take that job.
So you're satisfied with what you did in your. I know you already explained that, but it was a and you made a contribution, correct, to broadcasting in Canada.
So.
Yeah. No, what I'm trying to get at is that you were a cog in the wheel of connecting the country, correct? I mean, you linked a lot of communities in the north, and you were part of that whole process.
Yeah.
You were one of the people involved in that process.
One of many of the first people in the CBC at the time, and in Telesat at the time, that brought live television to a lot of the country that never had live television or radio.
That's very interesting. Yeah, well, that sort of sums up your career, and Dad, I'm going to thank you for doing this interview, and I'm sure a lot of people are going to find your story pretty interesting, and yeah, I just want to thank you for taking the time to speak to people and letting them know what you did. And you're retired now, so you're still working on stuff. And
Yeah.
but yeah. So anyways, we'll end the interview there. But Dad, I'd like to thank you very much for taking the time to speak. And I understand I have a gig that I got to get to, but this is kind of a last minute thing, but it was really fun to do, and thanks again for doing this, Dad, and we may see more of you on the YouTube channel.
Oh no, I hope not.
All right.
You didn't tell me that this was going to be on YouTube.
Oh, definitely going to be on YouTube.
Oh.
All right, Dad. Take care, guys.
I hope I don't get a whole lot of fan mail.
We don't do mail anymore, Dad. Take care.
Okay.